right, well, good evening. At this time, I'm going to call the Anacortes City Council meeting for April 12th, 2021 to order. Ms. Hunt, would you take the roll?
Mr. Carter?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Here.
Ms. Moulton?
Here.
Mr. McDougall? Mr. Miller?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Gear.
Yes, Mr. Walter.
Mr. McDougall communicated to me that he was going to be a few minutes late.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, I'll move on to item 2 under announcements and committee reports. And item 2A is the COVID-19 update. So as of this afternoon, the governor has moved 3 counties in Washington State back to phase 2. Those counties are Collins County, Pierce County, and Whitman County. And these counties had rising number in COVID cases and were not meeting the metrics set up in the Healthy Washington criteria. Skagit County has been able to maintain our numbers at this point, so we want to just keep up the good work so we can stay in phase 3. So as of today, on April 15th, as of April 15th, people aged 16 years and older that have not already been covered can receive their vaccine. The number of COVID-19 vaccination doses administered in Skagit County by a vaccine provider to date has been 81,586 doses have been given. Island Hospital has administered 6,390 of those vaccines. By the number in Skagit County as of the 10th of April, we've had 4,491 positive cases. We've had 67 deaths, and I might point out that's 2 more deaths than 2 weeks ago. And we've hospitalized 281 people during this COVID-19 time. In the 98221 area code, our actual case numbers have been from 390 to 399 cases. At Island Hospital, they tested 14,453 people and had a total of positive cases of 289. And to date have admitted 51 people to the hospital. And we've had no fatalities at Island Hospital. In Washington State, we've had 378,000 cases of COVID. In the United States, 31.2 million. In Washington State, we've had 5,373 fatalities. And in the United States, we've had 562,000 fatalities due to COVID. Worldwide, 136 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, including 2.9 million deaths. And that was reported by the World Health Organization. And that concludes my report today. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on now to item 2B, which are Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee Report.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The HACS committee met last Wednesday and we spoke about the Bellingham Down Payment Assistance Program that Mr. Frank Jareski was looking into for us. And it turns out with the high prices of homes and property and the lack of availability of those same things, that the program isn't really working even in Bellingham. The homes are too expensive or they don't meet the requirements. So that's not going to be a good match for us either, unfortunately. But then we got into the work that we are excited about on our social services strategic plan. So we did some brainstorming about the issues and the needs. And also we began to assemble in earnest our list of providers and what they do. So we did a great amount of progress on that. And we've begun to craft an invitation to interested stakeholders that we'll be reaching out to with some prompts and some questions so that when they show up to our roundtable meeting, we believe at the beginning of May that we'll have some direction for all of us. And we look forward to learning a great deal at that meeting. So we're moving along with that, and how then ultimately we'll coordinate services to fill the gaps that we have in our system. That was actually pretty much it. That took up most of the time. It was great.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Walton. Item 2C is the Planning Committee report.
I can continue to roll into that.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so that meeting happened just before this one. We talked a little bit about the 11th and B proposed vacation that has been in the works for about 10 years, we found out, and we are still waiting for a little bit more information on that will come to all of council this week before next week's meeting where we discuss it in earnest. We found out that the critical areas ordinance is coming before council next week. We'll have a reintroduction to the plan, and also there will be opportunity for public comment. Then we talked about infrastructure and stormwater and how there are some projects in the capital facilities plan to update some of our facilities for stormwater, and talking about potentially updating that stormwater plan and the basins that receive the stormwater. And we also talked a little bit about traffic analysis that is being done in different areas of the city. So that was very interesting also. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? All right, we'll move on then to item 2D, our Personnel Committee report.
Yeah, Mayor Gear.
Ms. Cleo McGrath.
Thank you. So yeah, we had a personnel committee meeting on April 8th with Mr. McDougall, Mr. Young, and myself. We discussed, we also had actually Mr. Lunsford from the Parks Department there to discuss some potential new hires, some that are actually in budgeted for, but just haven't been hired. We've been holding off. And also the Senior Center Activity Director, and figuring out what the timeline is and what roles they take. And also discussing, holding off on hiring people versus the cost of deferred maintenance. So we're going to get a little bit more information on that and have some more discussions. There's a ton of recruiting happening. We've got a lot of open positions. So the personnel committee is quite busy, Ms. Drew and Ms. Barber. We've done a lot of reorganization with and negotiations with the various unions, which has kind of compressed the pay scale. So there's been a request for proposal for reviewing the non-represented employees study to see if we need to make some modifications so that everything is kind of has goals of advancing careers. And also then looking potentially at all of the elected positions. There are 8 in the city. They haven't been looked at since 2005, so it's probably makes sense to consider where we're at and where we should be. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the personnel policies that Ms. Shu's working on just to get it prepared for whomever becomes our next HR director. Making sure that it aligns with Washington State's guidelines, and then also really doing a deep dive into the remote work policy, because we've now done so much because of COVID from home. What does that look like when we start to open up? Are there positions that make sense to have the option to stay at home, or what are those expectations? So it's very clear across the city. And then finally, I just wanted to say one last thing. Lynn Barber did an application for the Well City Award, and we won it, and we saved about $65,000. So well done. I know she's super busy, but that's a really great thing, and we're very proud of it. So that is it, unless someone else has anything to add.
In addition. Okay, thank you. So we're now going to item 3, which is public comment. And this is for anyone in the audience that wants to talk to the council about anything that is not on the agenda tonight. If it's on the agenda, we'll get to it shortly. Okay, I don't see anyone with their hands up. So we'll move back to item 4, which is our consent agenda. items A through D. Council, your pleasure.
Mayor Gear,
Mr. Miller,
I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
we have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. Young. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we're going to move on to item 5. This is a public hearing. 5A, it's open for public comment. This is ordinance 3088, an interim ordinance, extending ordinance 3076, 3069, and 3054. A moratorium on the acceptance of certain land use applications in the R4 use zone west of Commercial Avenue. This is a discussion and action item. Mr. Miesemer.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and the audience. Ordinance 3088 is an interim ordinance extending the moratorium on accepting applications using the bonus height provisions of AMC 19.42.050C. Essentially, that is where 25% of the units in the project must be not more than 600 square feet or less, and that would allow for an additional 10 foot past the 40 foot allowed in the R4 use zone, up to 50 foot. The moratorium does not apply to the affordable units option, and the current moratorium expires April 21, 2021. The moratorium applies to the R4 use zone west of the commercial use zone, west of Commercial Avenue. And due to the current state of emergency with COVID-19, staff have not met the work plan schedule under Resolution 3005 and are now preparing a resolution with an updated work plan for consideration by council at an upcoming meeting to complete this process by the end of September. So the current moratorium, again, expires April 21st. The proposed moratorium extension of 3088 would expire October 12, 2021. And staff is excited to get back to working on this and hopefully working with the community at large to come up with some alternatives and bring those to council for direction on which ones to take to the Planning Commission for further consideration by the community. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
No, I just wanted to comment to on Don and the team, really how much we appreciate just the push forward. We've had to kick the can down the road simply because of COVID and everything else, and then trying to reevaluate where do we go from here? How do we best serve the community? And then what, if any, changes we need to make in this process. So I appreciate hearing that it is on the agenda and that we will come to some thought or conclusion as to how we might get to where we want to be in the next few months. Is that correct, Mr. Miesemer?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mayor Gear.
Yes, Mr. Walter.
As the audience might recall, we proposed this moratorium. We adopted this moratorium because the neighborhood was surprised by that 5-story building behind Starbucks. This moratorium doesn't affect that building because it was vested at the time of application, protected from changes in the law. But we proposed the moratorium, in my view, and I suggested it, not to reverse the entire direction of the years-long comprehensive plan update that we had done, but to make some adjustments so that we can still accommodate growth near our commercial core, get more people shopping downtown, but also avoid substantial impacts on neighborhoods at the same time. So I hope that we can make some progress in the next couple months on this, not thinking, and I encourage other council members to weigh in if they agree, not thinking that this is a complete reboot of our development code again, but that this is working around the margins to ensure that development is able to integrate into neighborhoods, and that there isn't a hard line between 5-story buildings and single-story development. that it has a more even flow throughout the city. So I move approval of the ordinance as presented.
Hey, Gary. Okay, go, Mr. Miller.
Miller, and then Mr.
Yeah, I intend to second that, but I just wanted to make a comment. I agree with what Mr. Walters was saying. And I always love getting the maps to remind people where this is. I don't know, there's a good way to show this, but west of Commercial. But I also think as we move on to try to solve this issue, I was thinking, and I hate to give tasking, and I can't, Mayor. It's recommended tasking for you that maybe we try to do a side view type of map that integrates the contours of the geography. And I think Mr. Meismer probably knows what I'm talking about. And we have all these fancy GIS tools. Rather than having balloons strung up there, as we move forward to kind of get a sense of the actual project that has been approved, some sort of side view that fits in the geography. So I think that'll facilitate discussion as we move forward. So with that, I second Mr. Walters' motion.
Mayor Gear, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Meisner.
So it is a public hearing, and we need to take
Right.
public comment.
I was just getting to that.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hey,
My
jump on.
apologies.
They got ahead of you, those council people. So before we have a motion and a second, but before we take a vote, is there any member of the public that would like to comment this evening? This is a public hearing. All right, there are no hands. So I can close the public hearing, and you as a council now can take the vote. Ms. Hunt, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is under other business. It is 6A. This is also open for public comment. This is the Thompson Train Static Display Planning Discussion. So I'm going to start the conversation tonight, and then Ms. Swetnam is going to walk you through the elements of what I'm proposing to the council. And then I thought I'd open it up for public comment. And after you've heard from Ms. Swetnam, you've heard from the public, then I invite you all to have your discussion and decide next steps. All right. So you asked me to develop a plan for the city to construct a static display for the Thompson G. Thompson Jr. train that would be open to the public and comply with the terms of the 2012 letter from Ann Thompson donating the train to the city. You also asked me to explore the role of the Anacortes Train Railroad Group and how they can play a role in supporting that effort. So I stepped back for a moment, and Ms. Swetnam and I worked we looked at what elements would have to be in place no matter who was doing this arrangement. And so we're proposing a memorandum for you. We proposed one. And during that preparation, I met with city staff, including the museum director, Brett Lunsford, planning director, Don Meismer, parks director, John Lunsford, city attorney. And we also met with representatives of the Anacortes Railroad Group. And additionally, Ms. Swetnam has met with Ms. Lisa Carney, counsel for the Thompson family. And the goal of this planning effort has been to honor the legacy. And I also want to say, I thought a lot about how I could respect not only the legacy, but respect the family and their concerns about taking care of the train. And this also would address fully complying with the 2012 donation letter, also recognizing the community's support for the train display here in Anacortes. So you tasked me with this a little over 6 months ago. I'm returning tonight with some elements of how I see this possibly moving forward. So I do see, I'm going to have Ms. Swetnam speak, And I do see a hand up, but I will get to the hand as soon as Ms. Swetnam has given her presentation. So Ms. Swetnam, I'm now going to turn it over to you, and then we'll go to the members of the audience and get their comments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share, as the mayor said, she's asked that we present council with some components of the plan that has been developed over the course of the last 6 months. I've put together some slides to give you some ideas about the basics. Okay, so to start with, the mayor's tasks were to develop the following: a plan for a static display of the train, a plan that honors the commitment of the 2012 donation agreement to establish a static display, and a plan that integrates and identifies opportunities to work with a community volunteer group who has been really proactive in trying to find ways to support the effort to keep the train in town, and that's the Anacortes Railway Group. So the original donation, just to review, was made by Ann Thompson back in 2012, and at that point the train had been retired from operation. The original donation was done by a letter that provided that the train was to be transported, cared for, and stored in Anacortes, and to be used to establish a static display. So in looking at what needed to happen to move forward with a static display, as the mayor said, she met with staff members, including planning, museum, legal, parks, and there were some things that really became clear that needed to happen. The first is that the train shed where the train is located was something that was donated by the Thompson family in a separate donation before the 2012 donation happened. But that train shed had been an important part of the train's operation in town and seemed to be an important part of the legacy and history of the train. And so the recommendation is to improve that shed so that that can become a part of and house the static display. There are obviously some operational plans that need to be made for the static display itself, which I'll get into in a little more detail. And then there needs to be some consideration and plan for regular train and shed maintenance. So improving the train shed. So staff talked with a contractor in the community and identified some things that need to happen to bring the train shed up to a condition where it could house a static display. First of all, it needs to have power to the shed. That will allow for things like climate control, powerful lights, etc. There's also there are issues with the foundation of the building. I'm not sure the specifics of that, but I believe it's a pretty significant piece of what needs to happen to make the train shed operational. It may include installing significant portions of the foundation. The other thing that rose to the top is the fact that there isn't any insulation in the train shed. So that needs to be done to allow the shed to be able to protect the train from the elements. Windows need to be installed. Currently there are no windows. And then there are various improvements that need to happen to make the building meet certain code requirements. A big one is it needs to be made accessible to members of the public who need to have accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And finally, there will be some improvements that need to be made to the shed to allow for the interpretation of the train's history and the family's legacy. There are a lot of great ideas out there, and I think the hope was that at some point maybe the family would lean in and help the city develop those, and also the Anacortes Railway Group. Things like maybe a kiosk that shows a video that the family's made, signs, ways for artifacts that are connected with the train to be displayed along with the train itself. So the estimate for the cost to complete that work is between $100,000 and $115,000. The next key component of any plan to make the static display is how that display is going to be operated. So some necessary operational elements include the development of set hours for display display of the train. It seems like the public needs to be able to rely on times of year and times of day when they'll be able to go and visit the train. And that will have to be overseen by city staff. It is the hope of the city that that can be worked by volunteers and in some circumstances staff to make sure that the train is being monitored by docents and that it's being properly secured at the end of the open visiting hours. At this point, the budget impact of this piece of the puzzle is unknown. The city's hope is that the Anacortes Railway Group will supply volunteers to work during those hours when the display is open to the public, but it may be necessary to hire part-time staff if volunteers are unavailable. Oops. Sorry. Regular maintenance of the train and the shed is also an important commitment that the city needs to plan for. So some necessary work that has to happen with the train. I think in the staff level discussions, it became clear that the city would need to work with somebody who's got some experience or expertise in antique steam engines to be able to identify repair and maintenance work that needs to happen on the train. And I think everybody understands that there will probably be some initial work that will need to happen to open the train to the public, including cleaning and perhaps restoration. Again, exactly what that would entail will rely on some expertise from a steam engine. And then there will be annual work that will need to happen on the train, cleaning, maintenance, and those will be things that the city will need to work with an expert to identify and plan for as well. Next, the shed itself will require regular inspection and periodic maintenance as needed. And that's something that the city's got some structure in place already to do through our facilities department and some of the tools that the city has for managing and scheduling maintenance and inspections of the other city facilities. So the budget for this piece of the puzzle is also a little bit difficult to identify at this point, but staff is estimating that it will be between $15,000 and $20,000 annually. And again, the hope is that there could be donations from this community group or other community donors to help offset some of these costs. So the mayor's recommendation at this point to council is, first of all, that there be some budget allocation made for this. I think the mayor and staff heard council's concern in the past about allocating budget to this project. But it is also clear that when the city accepted the donation of the train, there was a commitment to operate and stand up that static display. And so the hope is that the city will be able to develop a memorandum with this community group of volunteers to fund these projects. But it is also reasonable that the city should have to put some funds towards this project as well to make sure that there's continuity of the display and of maintaining the assets. So the specific allocations that need to be made to move forward with this static display in 2021, staff estimates that about $115,000 will need to be generated to do the work to improve the train shed. And then in 2022, approximately $25,000 to kick off annual maintenance and upkeep. So the city hopes that these allocations can be met through working with the Anacortes Railway Group and through developing an MOA. But there may be some costs that if that group isn't able to offset, that the city could be asked to allocate to that project. So the next big piece is to work with this group of really enthusiastic and committed volunteers to help make the shared goal of keeping the train in Anacortes and available for the public in a static display a reality. And so the proposed steps that we've identified are, first of all, the city will need to enter into a contract to improve the train shed. And our recommendation is that the city hires a contractor to complete the necessary improvements to the train shed. This would need to be competitively bid, and the scope of work would need to include those items that we talked about in previous slides to make the train shed up to a condition that it could be open to the public for a display. And the city has quite a bit of experience in project management, so it makes sense that the city would oversee that contract and oversee that construction. The next piece is we would hope to come to terms with the Anacortes Railway Group to develop a memorandum of agreement that kind of lays out the relationship between the parties and how they can work together towards the shared goal of keeping the train in Anacortes and opening it up to the public. Some key components of that would be that the city would oversee construction and management of the static display, but that the Anacortes Railway Group will support the project with funding for the train shed improvements and ongoing operations and management. This group of volunteers has been really enthusiastic about wanting to give their time as well. And so our hope would be that they would provide volunteer support to help operate the static display. Also that they would be at the table and making design decisions about how best to honor the Thompson family and the legacy of the train in Anacortes. One of the concerns that this group brought up during discussions with them was that they wanted to make sure that the city was willing to commit to this project long term if they were going to commit significant funds. So that would be another thing that we would recommend, that there would be a commitment from the city for a long term to the operation of the static display. And we would also put in that agreement that the train will not be fired up. I want to say I had some great information from Councilmember Miller, who had a really good example of a similar type of arrangement that was made for the display of a couple of planes down at NAS Whidbey. And it sounds like that was a much more complicated process to negotiate an MOA, but that seems like that might be a really good model that we could use to take the next step and build an agreement with the Anacortes Railway Group. So some next steps could be that the mayor could direct staff to draft an MOA with the Anacortes Railway Group to meet the shared goals of developing a static display. And again, I think Mr. Miller has provided us a great starting point and a good example of how complicated management of artifacts can be accomplished through cooperation. Once negotiated, that MOA would come back to council. Mayor would be looking potentially for a final budget amendment to council to support any costs that weren't covered by the Anacortes Railway Group. The city would then think about procuring a contractor to improve the train shed. The contract, if the contract is awarded, that would come to council for review and approval. And then there would be some coordination between mayor and staff and volunteers in the community to coordinate the details to operationalize the static display, including coordinating with community partners, developing hours for the display, and finding a way to bring the vision to life. So that is the proposal that the mayor asked staff to develop, and I believe we are all available and happy to answer questions and feedback.
Mayor Gator?
Yes, Mr. Young, and then I'm going to go to the public.
Okay, well, I guess I have a series of questions concerning, I think, where we are in this process. I think, though, that I will save part of it for later on, but there's some things in here that I struggle a little bit with this agreement, because in order for a steam engine to really be maintained, it does have to be fired up at times. It does. And there are issues of tourism, there are issues of how do we get there. I know we focused on the 2012 agreement with the Thompson family. I respect that and understand that. But we also have a 2019 agreement as well. And that 2019 is just as legally binding. Yes, we want to honor the Thompson family. We really do. And the 2012 agreement is a legitimate way for us to do what we promised that we would. But there were some modifications to that in the 2019 agreement. I want to make sure that we're dealing with that as well. Static display, ADA compliance. I just want to make sure we're not walling ourselves into a conversation we've not explored the possibilities with the Anacortes Rail Group. I think that the challenge that we're facing as a city, and particularly in trying to address the train, is that in getting here has been 7, 8 meetings. I'm not sure how many anymore. I'm sort of punch drunk by that. But at the end of the day, we're here. The rail group has always been there. They've been the one maintaining it. They brought it back. They certified it. And in this proposal, we're talking about hiring experts that's already been here, been maintaining it from the very beginning. So what I'm worried about in this process is that we're overbuilding this huge thing that we have experts that are here. Yes, we need to do the due diligence to make sure that the train is well cared for. Yes, we need to make sure that we're in compliance with the 2012 and 2019. Yes, we need to have some sort of schedule that can work out. But the only way we're going to get there is if we get at the table, work out a solution that not only honors the family, honors the legacy of Tommy Thompson, does the care that we need to do to the community, and that allows this very rail group that has been there from the very beginning with Tommy Thompson to do what they've always done. But if we put too many barriers in that process, we lose again. So I'm concerned about that. And then I'm also concerned, finally, and forgive me, I don't mean any harm to anyone, but we've had a consistent resistance to this train and its operation from the standpoint of a static display. And what I'm saying is that we voted 5-2. I want us to come up with some solution that works for that vote we voted as a council, and that how we can serve the community. So I just want to make sure we don't get too caught out in there in setting rules until we can meet with all the stakeholders and figure out how truly we can push forward an agreement everyone can live with.
Okay.
I'll work on some other comments later on, but I needed to put that on the table because I think that what I've heard so far, I'm struggling just a little bit with the specificity in looking so forward that we haven't come up with an agreement yet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Young. I'm going to go to our attendees now and see what they're thinking, and then we'll bring it back to council.
Okay. So we're screen to share.
On your chair.
Yep.
And then go down.
And if the panel sit down. Yep, I'm not on top.
Okay,
Just now.
all right. I have Zoom 3. Your hands up. I'm not sure. Okay, Zoom 3, are you there?
Yes, hello, this is Hayden Thompson. Can you hear me?
Yes, you've got quite an echo, but go ahead.
Is that better?
No.
Okay, give me a second to try to improve this. Is that better?
Yeah. Okay. All right, it's a little better. Go ahead.
Okay, great. My name is Hayden Thompson, and I'm here on behalf of my mother, our family, and myself.
Thank you.
My father is Thomas G. Thompson Jr., designed, built, and operated the Thomas G. Thompson Jr. train. A portion of today's council meeting is discussed which of the two proposals presented by the mayor should be approved by the council. I want to remind the council that there are 3 options to consider regarding the resolution of the 2012 agreement between the city and the Thompson family. The option to return the train to the family. I request the council return the train to the family for the following reasons. In 2012, Ann Thompson, my mother, donated the train to the city of Anacortes. It is now 2021, 9 years later. Still, the conditions of the agreement have not been met. Equally outrageous is all that has happened since 2012. Though the Thompson family might understand some of the misguided efforts of the volunteers of the past, it is impossible to ignore the recent since 2019 efforts of the current Anacortes Railway Group. For years, there appeared to be no focus by the city in meeting the 2012 agreement. The volunteer groups have come and gone. The family was desperate to find a solution, and only when one was found did another volunteer group come forward to delay a resolution the family supported. The volunteer group was responsible for posting comments on the group's website that mocked and belittled the Thompson family efforts to preserve the legacy of their father. This disrespect by association fell on Thomas T. Thompson Jr. himself. This group is that now wants to be part of managing the train. This is not right. Some council members have stated it was never the intention of the council to disrespect our family, and yet the ongoing disrespect shows in so many ways. In the initial years, it was just that no action was taken by the city to meet the conditions of the agreement. In the years that followed, a volunteer group extended energy to steam up and run the train with no oversight from the city to stop the action until after the violation. Most recently, at the February 22nd, 21 meeting, council members said the family did not seem to understand that the government does not move as fast as the family wants. 9 years have passed with no progress on meeting the conditions of the agreement the city made with our family. Indifference to the family's concern is disrespectful. After years of no progress by the city, my mother endorsed a proposal brought forward by the council that in one action will remove the burden to the city of fulfilling the conditions of the 2012 agreement, get the train to where it could be properly tended. My mom, Ann Thompson, was told she must sign a new contract with the city to allow the transfer of the train to the identified party who had the expertise and financial resources to care for the train. She signed. Shortly after, not only did the council say no to transferring the train to the intended party, but now the council members, typically Mr. Young, claim they have contracts signed by Ann Thompson to allow the train to be sold to the party at the conditions. Council members are now focused on finding the highest bidder for the train built by my father. Our family was misled, betrayed, and outraged. Council did not appear to immediately take steps to sell on the open market, rather proposed that a volunteer group have more time to propose a plan. In memorandum, this sound.
Tom,
Can you still hear me okay?
hey, yeah, no, go ahead. Restate your last statement. You cut out.
The council did not appear to immediately take steps to sell on the open market. Rather proposed that a volunteer group have more time to propose a plan. In the memorandum from the mayor, the proposal from the volunteer group stated they wanted, among other things, a long-term lease of the train shed and land to guarantee the group the opportunity to feel secure in their investment of time and money would be worthwhile. The donation my mother gave to the city of Anacortes is a magnificent creation built and cared for by my father for over 34 years. And the volunteer group, who has publicly disrespected our family, now wants assurances that their investment of time in managing the train would be worthwhile. Are you kidding me? This is unbelievable. With the 2012 agreement, our family trusted the city to honor the donation of the train my father built. We never imagined in 9 years following the donation, train to the city, that the city would allow volunteers to take action not allowed in the contract, would take little action itself to comply with the contract, would reject a proposal that would relieve the city of the burden of the donation that it had shown it could not manage, and would mislead Ann Thompson, my mom, to sign a contract that was not for the purpose she intended, and then give deference to volunteers who, since my father's passing, have repeatedly failed in their attempts to revive the railway in Anacortes. again, volunteers whose webpage, until recently, reflected posts that publicly disparaged and disrespected the donor and her family. It is not right that the group whose members have done what some of these volunteers have done claim a right to manage the Thomas G. Thompson Jr. train, my father's train, going forward. For the Thompson family, honoring the work of our father is everything. There is no respect for the family in allowing anything less. I hear repeatedly being said, we've got to do something to honor the Thompson family, but I don't see any of it. To resolve the matter before the council today of how to manage and finance the train and conduce the 2012 agreement, I ask that you please turn the train to the Thompson family. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Mayor Gear? I cannot hear you, Mayor Gear.
Anthony, I'm going to go to the next speaker, and then we're going to wait and we'll rebuttal in a moment.
Just because my name was called, I wanted to make sure. All right, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, please.
And last thing, if we're going to focus on a time limit for the speakers, we need to make sure that it carries across to everyone.
Okay, Lisa, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me with what
Yes,
I'm doing?
yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for your time. My name is Carney. I'd like to ensure there's no misunderstanding on the paragraph 2 of the first page of the memorandum. It indicates Ms. Swetnam and I talked, and we sure did, but I want to be sure that it's clear that the Thompson family, neither are the Thompson family, contributed to any part of the proposals. So I just want to be sure that wasn't suggested there.
Okay, all right. No, we're clear on that.
Okay. And the second thing, as Hayden Thompson brought up, I understand the focus of the meeting is to do those proposals the city presented about keeping the train in town. I wanted to be sure that there was a third option that was in the radar, that to remove from the city the burden of all this organization, which, by the way, based on your presentation, huge amount of time was invested, tremendous effort to get details, to explore so many things, that if there, and a lot of discussion about dollars and how much things might cost, and that we are hoping that different players will participate. There's an old saying that hope is not a financial plan, that as we go through and hear how the financing all of this is relying on hoping that different players will participate. I'd just like to say if the council can see their way to return the train to the Thompson family, they benefit in so many ways. One is they stop the investment of their time on the train. The second, they're released from all financial responsibility now and in the future related to the train. And the risk of exposure to a suit on the claim of a breach of contract would be eliminated. These are just things I hope the council could keep in their minds as we have discussion going forward. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ms. Carney. All right, is there anyone else in our panelists that would like to speak this evening? Okay, so Dave, just a moment. Dave, can you hear me? I'm trying to get Dave on here.
So, yep, he's allowed to talk. He just unmuted, so that's good.
How do I get him on?
He's on.
Okay, Dave, do you hear me?
You have it as a microphone right there, and it's not red.
Okay. What?
So you have the microphone right there,
Yeah.
and it's not red.
Dave, are you there? Mr. Sims? Well,
That's on him.
okay. All right, Dave, I'll come back to you because we can't hear you right now.
So he's muted himself.
All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the council? I can come back to you. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the council for their discussion. And we'll come back to the audience. All right, so council.
Here.
Just one moment, please. I'm having technical difficulties.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to learn to be the IT person tonight, too.
You're doing a good job.
Okay, so Mr. Young, if you could, you spoke, if you could keep it brief so other members, and then we'll come back to you, of course, but go ahead.
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor Gear, but when my name is called and when there's an issue of this discussion, I think that it's important that we get all the questions out and the questions that council needs to have in order to make a decision. I know you understand that, and I hear you as well.
All right.
With that said, the truth of the matter is that we had an item that was for sale that we didn't know was for sale, was never surplus. And so then, therefore, there was, all of this work to try to make a sale for an item that we really needed to find out what protocol was. The Anacortes Rail Group, to the truth of everybody that's listening, have always been a partner not only to Mr. Thompson himself, but they were the ones that lovingly went down to Seattle and picked up the train and brought it back. They lovingly restored it. They bought items for it. They took care of it until they were stopped, and they have the experts. So they are not Johnny-come-latelys to the project. In 2019, they also were continuing to try to figure out how do we help the train and honor the legacy of Mr. Thompson. Whether that's 2012 or 2019, there's always been people here willing to do with the expertise that's necessary. So to sort of assert that is not true, I, as a council member, have always tried to do exactly what was in the best interest of this city and to make sure that due diligence is followed for proper protocol with any item. And in this case, I made sure that that was done. And I also made sure that the public were acutely aware such that their voices could be heard, and we as elected members of council would honor those voices. What I am saying about the rail group is that we're talking about a budget and cost and the ramifications, and the Anacortes Rail Group has already proposed that it doesn't cost the city anything. And if we can't explore that and then say after we explore that, this is what we've come to, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. And unfortunately, this has been the delay in getting this project done, and I'm looking forward to moving it forward. Council has already voted 5-2. I don't know of any other project that's come before council 8 times. I find that a little bit a misuse of council time. I just think you as a mayor should make these things into place, bring the groups together, come up with a great solution, work through it, and then bring us a proposal. That's just my opinion, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Okay, council, other thoughts moving forward?
Mayor Gear.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller, then Mr. McDougall.
So clear, the council needs to, again, I'm always sad to hear family members not happy with anything that the city's doing. But obviously the council's job is to act in the best interest of all of the citizens of Anacortes, because we have the legal determination that the train does belong to the city. I probably will never be able to convince Hayden that we are trying to act in the best interest of the family. But we have to try to move forward, and the static display is what the council has said is the best way to move forward. So in reviewing what you and Ms. Swetnam presented, I do have some of the concerns that we've put a lot more roadblocks in there than solutions. I was almost going to say we're literally taking the steam out of any organization's ability to try to work with the city to make this static display happen. But wait, I just said it. So anyway, I really think that we've kind of done ourselves a little disservice. Heavily bureaucratic, heavily micromanaged, one-sided city, which is fine. but I really think we need to bring the Anacortes Railway Group, a trusted 501c3, to the table and start working some of these issues rather than it being in front of council to work the details out. I mean, we could, taking the steam out of it, I don't think that's a good idea. Just make sure everybody's properly insured. It's an art piece. Does it need to fall under the museum or the parks department? All that stuff doesn't need to be worked out, I don't think, at the council level. But I do think, because we tried to answer, I know, Mayor, you tried to answer all of the questions and concerns from the city staff level. It made it pretty darn bureaucratic from my point of view to trying to get a group that has really said, we've got the funds, just let us work with it. We'll sign a contract and we'll get a static display going in the city. So those are my comments for now.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And all right, yeah, might take it. Mr. McDougall.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a tricky one. It doesn't feel like it should be an issue that we spend eight meetings on, but it is a tricky one because it's a debate over essentially doing right by, say, the citizens of Anacortes, at least a perceived view of the right by them, versus maybe what's doing right by the donor and an agreement that we essentially did not successfully fulfill from back in 2012. And I've gone back and forth on this quite a bit. I don't think we're going to make, no matter what we do, we're going to make some people angry. Some people are going to be upset. And I think I'm swung back to the point of, I think it's not so much about doing right by the citizens of Anacortes, because I don't know that the citizens of Anacortes are a monolithic blob that wants to do one thing here. I think the community is actually probably split in what the right thing to do is. And so at this point, I think for me, the right thing is to actually return the train to the family, because I feel like we did not live up to the 2012 agreement. And I don't want to risk spending city funds on this project. I think I'd like to return it. Thank you.
Thank you. What else do we think?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Walters.
I think generally what you've put forth here is a very good proposal. It is something that we should have started immediately after we obtained the train almost 10 years ago. I was going to say that we should reach out to the family to seek their input, but I guess now we've gotten it. My sympathies lie with returning the train to the family, but let's set that aside for a second, because I don't know that that is going to happen, because I don't know that the votes are here on council for that. In terms of maintaining a static display, if the train is a priceless piece of Anacortes history, we do not turn over priceless pieces of Anacortes history to a nonprofit third party. 501c3 status is a form you fill out. I've done it before. You make sure the right language is in the articles of corporation, you're good to go. The Anacortes Railroad Group is a group of people with a lot of good intentions, but it doesn't currently have assets, and it doesn't have a long history. It has some good ideas, and they provided us a rendering of what the train shed might look like that I thought looked really great. It really raised the potential of what we could do with the train shed and how we could display it here in Anacortes. I think the train shed building seems really well suited to be the home of the train. The train fits in the building, it's in the right place, it's at the depot, it's historically relevant to the train, and with some modifications, it could work. It's $100,000, that's real money, but any construction project like that would probably end up spending $100,000. I do think that there are alternatives to getting the railway group to contribute. We could do a fundraising appeal to the public Anacortes loves the train. I bet that they would contribute. We've had a lot of success through the Parks Department, especially at getting private contributions for things Anacortes cares about. As a general matter, we do need to constrain the number of separate buildings we're operating, mainly because of staffing costs, also because of square footage of maintenance. But if we can mitigate the staffing costs, that is the major component. So if the railway group can contribute volunteers on a regular basis for whatever schedule we are able to work out, that seems to me to be viable. On the question of operating the train itself, steaming it up even, I think we need to be very careful about that, and I don't think that should be done outside of the city's supervision. Maybe it does. Maybe we don't say that it can't happen at all, but the boiler has to be inspected through L&I. It is a potential danger. The city, as the entity that is responsible for the asset, really needs to oversee and be responsible for that. So maybe that part of the question can be deferred, but that's my position on where we should end up landing.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. I remember in an earlier packet regarding the train that council was presented a letter from the Anacortes Railway Group. It was from 2018 that said, essentially, we, the Anacortes Railway Group, realize that this isn't something that we are able to do, and we wholeheartedly support the train going to someone who does have the wherewithal, experience to run it, wherever that may be. So I believe that certain steps were taken by the city after that and by the family to find someone who could fulfill those wishes of the family. And when Mr. Iwan worked with the family and came up with a proposal that was very detailed and he had the wherewithal to carry it out, it seems to me that the Anacortes Railway Group then rebanded and opposed that, and with all their good intentions and passion, decided they wanted another go at it. And so I don't really see that this was a long running. I mean, we have the letter where they graciously said, we're done. We support someone else doing it. And based on that and the family and what they want, I am with Mr. McDougall. I support returning the train to the Thompson family.
Thank you.
Mayor Garrett.
Yes, Ms. McGrath.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you, Mayor Gear, for taking the time to try to address the original agreement in 2012, address the 2019 agreement, figure out what the responsibilities are for the city to honor those agreements, and try to kind of simplify it down what options are actually viable. So thank you to you and thank you to staff for spending the time, because I know all of the different staff members involved have spent years working on this, and for some reason we don't ever get to a plan that is actually implemented. And because of that, as we incrementally have more and more meetings about it, I have more and more compassion for the family, even though it is an asset and we've determined it was given to the city, and whether or not it needs to be returned to the family, I understand the raw frustration, right? That authentic frustration, because they hear a lot of proposals, they want to get behind it, and it doesn't ever come to fruition. So I guess my challenge, and I'm hoping there may be someone available from the Anacortes Railway Group, is, a lot of this proposal depends on that group participating, whether it's through fundraising and doing a pared down version of upgrading the existing shed that was built by Tommy himself, or it's, organizing volunteers or doing ongoing maintenance. The proposal sounds good that you guys have come up with, but major missing piece is the group and what their thoughts are and their level of enthusiasm, and if they're even interested in this kind of plan moving forward. And so hopefully there's someone on here who would speak to that. My other concern is, as much as we hear people want to support the train, this has been on an agenda item for a while now. This was presented, it was on in the packet. And my concern is I'm surprised that there aren't any people coming out in support of this proposal. And I'm that gives me pause.
Okay.
Mayor Gear, unless there's someone else, I have something I want to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, here's the truth that we all do know, and here are some statements of facts I think that we can agree on. First of all, there was funds allocated by the foundation for the maintenance and upkeep of the train. It was. And the money sat there for years with the intent that there would be a joint building, I do believe, between one of the old fire engines and the train. So that work had been going on. The Anacortes Rail Group has, from the very beginning, recertified the train, took care of the train. So to sort of say that they have not been there is not true. And secondarily to that, they did not reform, to address Ms. Moulton's statement. They did not reform in 2018. There were a group of them that were still in place. They had already formed their group and had been meeting and trying to get together to do their 501c3. 2019 and 2020, we all know, has been COVID and have prevented them from coming forward. Originally, the city put forward a group of expectations that were, in my opinion, far exceeding anything that they had asked of anyone. Mr. Ewan came supposedly with a proposal that we thought was stellar, but at the end of the day, I do believe Richard Walker in the Anacortes American did a wonderful story on that, where he analyzed what had taken place, called the city of Lincoln, I believe California, and found out nothing had really gone forward but beyond anything else. But yet in council, we had said that it was told to us that we believe that this plan that they had in California was so far ahead and light years ahead of what we've done. The struggle I have is that our museum director not only brokered this, but negotiated in this process in a vacuum, and that the council has already voted 5-2. We keep seeming to want to come back to a question that we've already answered as a council, because each of us have one vote, but yet we're going to try to come back for an 8th time, hoping that we get 4 votes. Not only in this process, Mr. McDougall, you have gone from one side to the other as new data comes. I get that, reevaluating that, but it is a city asset. We have the things in place. The Anacortes Rail Group is experts that work with Mr. Thompson himself. They have boiler certified people. Everything is in place, and they have volunteers, but we never fully took a look at that. They've been shouting that from the roofs. So I'm a little surprised at the lack of information maybe you have about what it seems that they propose to council in their emails, but they really do have the structures in place, the facilities in place, the experts in place, and yet they have the fundraising capability, because from the testimony of Mr. Bynum or Mr. Board, I can't think of his name, they've already said, tell us what we need and we will move forward. So we can move this forward. But what we're having right now, I think, is somewhat of an instructionism to this process, because we're hoping to get 4 votes in the opposition now when we've already voted. So for me, that's a little bit problematic. And then secondarily, when we have staff and a team that's saying that they have a difference of opinion, which I respect, I really do. But when we vote, as we did already, and we said that we would move forward, which we have, and we're coming back and charge you, Mayor, with coming back with a proposal, which we have, and you have, now it comes to the negotiation. So I don't know how we get back to giving something back when we've already voted and it's a city asset? I don't understand that. So, and so I struggle with that just a bit.
Thank you.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. McDougall.
I voted in support of asking the mayor and staff to bring a proposal a few months back, and thank you, mayor and staff, for bringing that proposal. I voted in support of having that proposal come forward. That means we presumably have an option to vote to actually approve the proposal. At this point, I would not vote to approve the proposal.
Okay.
Mayor
So
Giff?
I have, yes, Mr. Miller, and then I have a couple people, attendees that like to speak. Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Yeah, I certainly hope, it says it's a discussion item for tonight, and it would be disingenuous if we were either voting for an action to return the train or voting for an action to support this proposal as presented, because this proposal as presented is not quite mature enough in my mind to say this is where we're going, because we haven't negotiated with the ARG. So those actions would be, I think, terribly disingenuous of what we were going to talk about tonight. But again, just one little piece of history. I know we've talked a lot about history, but the Anacortes Museum Foundation went through a challenging period of time with illnesses of many of its members right about the time that this was happening, right about the time there was $50,000 set aside. So haven't gotten the final answers to that, but that was part of the challenge of the history of the display. And there would be people in previous city staff, in the city staff, that would argue that the train was displayed a number of occasions, you know, clearly not to the satisfaction of certain members of our community. But again, just a little bit of history there, and I'll let you get to, I think you said you had somebody wanting to chime in.
Okay. So. Where?
Bottom right on that screen. Oh. Move up. Go up. See that window?
Okay, all right.
Now
So-
click look panels. Okay. Now you can hover over to the bottom.
Okay, so Dave Sims, I've allowed you to talk.
Hi there, can you
We
hear
can
me
hear
now?
you.
Okay. So I was going to say about this proposal tonight is the Anacortes Railway realizes that tonight's proposal is an ongoing process, and we're looking forward to working with the city when a course of action is agreed upon. We think we need our time at the table also to move forward with this thing, and we have options that haven't been discussed yet. We're waiting on this first proposal, the draft, to see what we could do. And we would just like to get to the table, show you what we have. Our plan calls for no city staffing or funds. And we can make this happen, but we would just like to have our fair shot to explain what's going on too. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Sims. Okay, so now I need to go to the next person. And then Lisa Carney, do you still want to talk? Lisa?
Yes,
Your hand was up. Were you wanting to talk again?
I would. Is that an option?
Yes, go ahead.
So I have a disconnect question that could be answered. The council seems to be confused about the priority of the donation over what the citizens of Anacortes would like and what the fans of the train are about. If there is a donation and there are conditions and the conditions are not met, how does the council sort of rationalize to say, well, yeah, it was supposed to be for a static display, but we really prefer to steam it up, and really that would be better, and so let's just go for it and say that's what we're going to do, and we should, and by the way, everybody wants it, so that's what we'll do. But the whole donation started with the contract of 2012. Is it possible, is the council, that Could anybody speak to that, that they could get a donation with conditions and then ignore those and do something else? Is that seems to be what the argument is, and I'm missing it. Can anybody speak to that?
So I'll get back to council and see if Ms. Sweatner maybe can address that, but I don't believe that's the intent. Okay, is that everything, Lisa? And then I'll get out of here.
Okay, so so you're saying we can't get a response to that. The other thing about sort of the consequences of the actions taken up to now, again, the years that passed where no action was taken to comply with the terms of the agreement, the conditions, and then the people who are wanting to say, but we love the train and we're enthusiastic, but by the way, we're also open to posting disparaging remarks and comments related to the family. How does that come together in an ability to say we are here because we all want to honor the train and honor the donation, but we couldn't get around to it for several years. And by the way, we are open to being disrespectful in a public forum. Again, I'm not so how the council rationalizes to say that is a good fit for a donation that came from the Thompson family. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. So, all right. So, Darcy, did you want to address anything at this point or not? Which is fine. Yeah,
I'm happy to answer questions if you would like me to. I think Lisa Kearney's question about the contract, one of the things that we had previously looked at is, what a breach of contract action would look like. And unfortunately, the terms of the 2012 donation agreement are pretty vague. And so I think it is the, kind of the goal of the city to honor the spirit of that agreement, but maybe with a fairly low risk of legal action based on breach of contract.
Okay. All right, council. Well, I've made my proposal this evening. I've done what you asked me to do. We've heard from the family. We've heard that the railroad group wants to have time at the table. So I guess I'm asking you all, do you want me to come back in a week or two with more information? I mean, how do you want to proceed?
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, well, one of the things you asked for was money from the council, and that's one area that we do have responsibility for, and I'm not willing to certainly vote for any money towards it until I see a memorandum of agreement between the city and a nonprofit group, and it seems like the Anacortes Railway Group is the most qualified one to do this memorandum of agreement with. Again, I worked in MOA with the National Naval Aviation Museum, City of Oak Harbor, NAS Whidbey Island, two nonprofit groups, and it was $79 million worth of aircraft, and it's sitting on a display. It's not that hard. I know there's some challenging and emotional issues to overcome, but I think that's what I would like to see. If you're asking, I'd like to see a more completed MOA with some of these things. Again, this is great. This is a great starting point. It lays out all the city's concerns. Now give the Anacortes Railway Group to lay out their concerns, see if they work. And, if they don't, they don't. But I think we went back and forth 10 or 12 times to get this memorandum of agreement to where we have these two airplanes on a stick when you drive down Highway 20 and Altfield Road.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Walters.
I think Mr. Miller makes a good point there. It is important that we get some commitment for staffing of this facility in order to commit city funds to building the facility. If city funds are not required to build it, so much the better. I think we do need to put some bookends on how staff are to negotiate such an agreement with the group. I would think that those bookends would look largely like what your proposal looks like. Maybe there's some room for maneuvering in there, but if we are to pursue that course, I don't want other parties that we're negotiating with thinking that the universe is wide open for modifications. I think what we are largely talking about is this outline here. And then if we can get commitments to staff this facility and commitments to help build it, or commitments from other members of the public, donations to help build it, launch a Kickstarter if you have to, we can move forward, I think, if it is the council's decision to move forward in this direction. I think that that's what our course ought to be now. I do also want to say, though, that speaking only for myself, I reject any disparaging remarks about the family. I don't know anything about whatever comments have been posted on whatever website. But I would reject anything like that. And I don't really want to do business with a group that embraces that. Now, people can post comments on websites, so I don't know what the details are of this. But I hope that that ends here and does not continue.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
Well, you know, and I totally agree with Mr. Walters and Mr. Miller. At the end of the day, we all know what websites we are likely talking about, and I'm not aware of any of the Anacortes Rail Group that have posted anything disparaging about the family. To the contrary, it has been very loving, but they're in an anonymous environment. The public really can be visceral and quite brutal. And I too am sympathetic to the family. That's not something that should be taking place, but that is not something the rail group can control. Secondarily to that, when we say as a council that we have decided, and then we keep coming back to the issue, back to the issue, and back to the issue, it's like paying for your groceries and getting back in line again to pay for them a third, a fourth, a fifth time. We've decided that. Mr. Bynum has already said to the mayor, and I believe at council, they are willing to come forward and write a check to show their intent, or write some type of agreement to show their funding intent to the city. That should not be ignored. Secondarily, there are other people who've been at the table that are there, whether it's steam engine experts that are there, that the Anacortes Rail Group has delivered. Even though it may not appear in this conversation that we're having right here, right now, the truth of the matter is they have the expertise, they have the willingness. So I'm not sure of what the reluctance is for moving forward. I think we've drugged a little longer than I think is necessary, and I think it's kind of harming the continuity of where we go from here. I think that as we move forward, I'm looking for the mayor to come back in her next iteration after a conversation with the rail group and Darcy, and if any input from the family or whenever or whomever, that we come back with a much more concise plan. The idea that a steam engine that we're going to use to attract not only tourism to this area, to not fire it up damages that engine. And secondarily, third to this whole problem is that when we talk about whether or not we've met the criteria in the 2012 agreement, I am not a lawyer, but if we consider that the train was pulled out on display, people can peek in from time to time, the doors were open during the festivals that we've had, what is that? But I just don't think we've been very fair to the Anacortes families, the Anacortes Rail Group, because they have been there from the beginning with experts, even with Mr. Thompson. So I'm just saying, I'm hoping that staff pulls it together with the rail group to come up with a solution, because we've had some resistance, and I think we all know whom and what that is. Thank you.
Mr. Young, tonight's presentation was to address all the elements that I knew were important to put in an agreement. It was meant to and it was met with keeping in mind working with the Anacortes Railroad Group. But I also know when you have a city as an asset, we have certain responsibility of things that we have to do when we manage that.
I totally understand that.
And I conveyed that to the group. This was step one tonight. So I just want to be clear, this was not done without working with them or without keeping them in mind.
I didn't even suggest that.
And my true hope was that the Thompson family, even though it is 9 years later, would say, okay, you know, the city is moving forward, is doing what we originally asked, and that they might lean in and give us some grace to see if we can fulfill this. But I'm very concerned about how they're feeling as a family, and I don't want that family to ever feel disrespected to them or their father or the legacy that they've, you know, been provided to this community. So it's been difficult, and it's and we've been trying to be respectful to everyone. And my directors have worked very hard on this. And one other thing I want to address, I'm the one that took the original phone call from Mr. Iwan. And I asked Brett, I said, well, you know, check this out. Is this a real person? Is this something we should consider? So it really came to me, from me, to staff to look at that. So I wanted to set the record straight on that also. So that being said, Mr. Carter, did you want to say anything tonight? Or would you like to wait till next time? You've been kind of quiet there. Leading in though.
I've been taking notes and just waiting.
Yeah, that's fine.
A lot of what I was going to say has been said.
Okay, well, I think I've got my instructions. But is there any other comments from the council tonight for myself and staff to come back for the next time on this?
Yeah.
Yes, Ms. McCreary-McGrath and then Ms. Moulton.
Yeah, I think that this proposal for today really helped our discussion. But I hope that the next presentation is sooner than later, because as time goes on, things ebb and flow, and different ideas come, and discussions that made sense 2 weeks ago kind of disappear, and it's a new version. So hopefully, and this isn't an easy request, but that the next step moving forward is that we see something with a little bit more substance to it, and substance from the train group, because we're putting a lot of hope and kind of confidence in them, and they're all great folks who have proven themselves in the past with other projects. But we as a city have a responsibility that we need some teeth in the game when it comes to that MOA beyond something on paper, but that this can actually come to fruition. And to me, that's an important thing to show the family if we're going to really try. And I completely agree with your intent that my hope was that somehow we could present something and get some grace from the family and show them that there's a lot of us who have really fond memories and think it's a beautiful, unique piece of Anacortes history and Thompson family history, and having it stay here is something that folks would be able to honor, and those who weren't able to ride it would get to see the beautiful artistry and craftsmanship. But if we can't get something going of substance that has steps outlined of what we're doing in the next month, 6 months, and a year, then I think we have to change course, because it's not fair to leave it in limbo. And we've spent a lot of time with staff. You've had a lot of time. We've had a lot of time. The family has, and the public. And so at some point we have to say, we've done all we can. Let's honor the wishes of the family if we cannot find a solution that honors the 2012 agreement.
Thank you. Ms. Moulton.
I just want to thank you, Mayor Gear and staff for the proposal and the level of detail and the concerns that are addressed in it as far as the operational considerations, the maintenance. I think that was well done, and I really appreciate the thought, care, and time that went into that. So thanks.
Mayor Gibb, one last thought, please.
Yes, please.
No, I just wanted to say that the truth is, and we all know it, the Anacortes Railroad Group has been there from the beginning. They have put forward proposals. They've got plans of action they've developed that we've asked for. I just don't see them having not tried to comply with what we've asked of them. What we've not done and need to do, I think in a stronger sense, Mayor, is to bring them to the table to see exactly what they're planning, such that we can enlighten the rest of council to see, and maybe even the Thompson family, for realizing that this display that they're talking about is truly an honor to the Thompson family and the legacy of the train being here in Anacortes. I just think that that's where we're missing it. And any of the premise that we put about the Anacortes Railroad Group, I think is a little more shallow than it really is, because they have been unwavering in their support and ability to support this train. And I think we need to see that in writing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other comments? All right, so I will return to you. I'll make a goal of a month to come back with you with something to addressing your questions and concerns tonight. Okay, is there anything else for the good of the order? At this time, I will adjourn the meeting. Have a good evening. Bye.